Over the course of my career, I found out the hard way that there is a paradox that quite literally keeps people small. It keeps you from seeing your financial potential and therefore living the life that you want to live. And nobody is really talking about it because it is painful. It is an obstacle that we all face, and it kept me from making money a long time. I'm talking about the paradox between creativity and control. One side, you have the creative potential that can impact this world. It is your internal potential. But then on the other side, you have what the world needs and how it wants it. External adjustment, where you have people wondering why doesn't this work? And then on the other side, you have people losing themselves in control, perfectionism, procrastination, perfecting ideas in their head, pivoting until they get sick and tired of the idea, never publishing, never launching, or selling anything. More on the perfectionistic end, the control end of things, I struggled with this for a long time. So much so that I needed to come up with a solution myself. And so I created a two-step system that allowed me to start conquering this obstacle. And it quite literally allowed me to start making good money through my online business. And so I'm going to share everything with you so that you can start seeing your financial potential. But I have to caution you because especially the second step is very uncomfortable. And so with that being said, let's break this ceiling of yours and let's get into the system. So first of all, let me describe how universal and how human this problem is. This paradox is the exact same thing that stopped Napoleon. I find it a very fascinating example because throughout his career, most of his successes could be attributed to the fact that he was so wild in his creativity, to be so unpredictable in his strategies that for a long period of time nobody was able to deal with Napoleon. But over the course of his career, he started to gain higher stature, riches, status, making him, just like anyone else, a person who didn't want to lose these things. As the fear of losing these things that he didn't have in the beginning started to kick in, he started to become afraid. And when people become afraid, we start to exert control. More and more and more control to just try and reduce the probability of failure and rejection. And as he started to apply more control, he became predictable. He started to lose most of his battles, eventually leading to the whole downfall of Napoleon, the balancing act between creativity and control. And it usually gets the best of us, unless we're able to see through it. And to do so, we have to understand the obstacle. The obstacle is the fact that creativity and control are almost like polar opposites that hate each other and are both addictive. Once you are in this creative modus, you don't want to stop. Once you are in this modus of planning and strategizing and controlling, it is very hard to stop. Where on the one side it is over-analyzing, overthinking, perfectionism, and on the other side of creativity you have more procrastination and just being very unadjusted to what the world actually needs. Both are getting bad results. Both have their own beliefs and fears that we will dissect in a bit. But at this point, it is very important to understand, who are you? Are you the creative or are you the controller? Because at the start of my career, I was the creative. I just got into coaching. I was so passionate about everything and about my ideas that I believed that I just should be this passionate and keep doing what I'm doing, and then everything will find its place. So convinced about the idea of helping young men find purpose in their lives, right? A very loving idea, but I didn't want to validate the idea. Creating a market triad, I didn't want to do these things, probably because I didn't want to hear what I actually knew, which is it wasn't a good idea. Young men that are lost usually don't have the money to invest in a coaching program. That was the truth, and I didn't want to see it. So I just kept going in this passionate pursuit, making the whole fucking course for these men to go through, just to eventually learn that, in fact, these men don't have the money to invest in it. Overextended into the creative side of the paradox. But then later, as I started learning more about the coaching industry, about everything there's to it really, I started overextending into control. And things actually got much more painful than they got before, because whereas before I was creating, at least I was making a course that, okay, maybe nobody was buying, but I was creating. It wasn't adjusted to the world, but at least I was creating. When I got into this phase, I learned that I was actually very perfectionistic. I often got into a phase of creating content just to make something that works. I often got stuck in script writing. I often got stuck creating hooks, and it's this narrowing path of where your intellect starts to contract and you become quite stupid, under the false belief that you're actually being smart about things. It was keeping me at a sliver of my potential. So I've seen both of these sides, but I know that for me personally, I would be more of the controller. And I would like to ask you the same question. Are you an excessive creative or controller? It is crucial for you to know which of the two you are as we now go into the system. So I like to call the two-step system controlled chaos. And before we get into the two steps, let me just paint you a picture of how it works. You start all the way at the left in your most creative zone, a very potent creative idea. And you have this raw diamond. Then we start walking the line to the right to apply a subtle but very necessary level of control until you reach your balance. They're right in the middle, and then you stop and let go. Now, you might be wondering, why don't we start at the right? Well, if you start with something that does well, then you will create a shittier version. If you do what works for someone else, then you will be inauthentic and people will always notice. Or if you pursue what others are pursuing, then you will be unaligned to your core. And this is a very, very important one in this 10K a month era where everybody has a business model and a way to 10K a month, and nobody is really talking about whether it connects to your core, right? So if you just start doing what some other guy is doing, then you will be misaligned with yourself, with that creative side. So we start with creativity, this raw diamond, and then we start shaving off the debris. And I think it was Ed Sheeran who just put this very, very well. He talked about his creative process as opening a tap and water comes out and there's like mud in it. You have to keep the tap open until slowly it becomes more pure and more pure. And then once you got rid of all of the dirt and the water is pure, you fill your glass and you close it, you shut it down. That is the process of walking that line from creativity, that very potent internal potential, adjusting it to the world, what it wants and how it wants it, just enough to fill that glass and then shut it down. Let it go. I think that's a very nice metaphor. So let's start with step one. That's the process of you walking from that creative side and applying that slight level of control. And I have a very clear system to help you do that. But first, the problem of creativity is one that we believe that everything should be no boundaries, just pure freedom. That we are most authentic and passionate if we are totally free in our creativity. And that is actually complete garbage. Freedom is also a paradox. Freedom doesn't exist without boundaries. When you live without any boundaries, then you live in a prison of options, and we need boundaries to create. And so when you are overextended on the creative side, then the fear here is fear of rejection. It says, I'm not going to follow the steps, I'm just going to create what's truly coming from here, and then having you end up wondering why this just doesn't work. And this goes for anything. Let's take content creation. Instead of just turning on this camera and having the audacity to just start talking, which some of us, right, they can do this, and kudos to them. I can't. I need to order my thoughts, put some effort into it and write about it. And so where creating content starts with a raw idea that is valuable and you then work that out, then you apply that slight control to it. Then you start walking the line. And for example, that happens by packaging it into a story, right? Man versus obstacle, creating a hook that intrigues people. If I didn't create a hook in the beginning of this video, you most likely wouldn't be watching right now, right? It isn't a matter of manipulation. It is a courtesy of packaging it well. It is following the steps of making things more consumable for other people, adjusting it enough for people to enjoy it and really see your idea, right? And for example, I use the 7Q system, which is a fancy way of saying I answer these 7 questions you see on the screen as a system to apply control to my creative process. The same happens with business. You can have a raw idea and say, I'm gonna coach because I just want to help these men find direction. But does your target audience have money? Is it connected to the 3 eternal markets, well-being, money, and relationships? If not, then people will probably not pay for your solutions. But here's the general system, the actual step 1. I like to call it GPS. Let me give you an example. If your goal is having 1,000 subscribers on YouTube within 2 months, then your plan for you to get to that goal would be post a video on YouTube every 3 days, write exceptional scripts, and make everything more personal. Then the system of exercising that plan would be 1 hour of writing every morning, include a story in every single script, and shoot all the content for the week on Wednesday. So now you have those boundaries that make sure you are going in the right direction, that you're not losing yourself in creativity, that you can very effectively walk the line to that middle point. You're ensuring that it works by adjusting it to the world. Now that you've done the first step, it would be perfect if we were able to then let go of controlling, but that's not how this shadow of control works. So the second step deals with that shadow from the other side, the shadow of control. Call it perfectionism, overthinking, overanalyzing. It is simply an obsession for control that should hide the fact that you are afraid of something. Where for creativity it's the fear of rejection, here it's the fear of failure. Obsessive control is a narrowing, time-consuming and painful experience, and to lose yourself in meaningless details. If you've ever chosen a font or a brand logo for 3-4 hours, then you know what we're talking about here. So on the surface, how I learned to combat this shadow of control is through simplicity and clarity. And in fact, that you're already doing this through step 1. By creating your GPS, right? The navigation that you can follow, you have the ability to zoom out, right? You can create this helicopter view, which is the antidote to this narrowing, perfectionistic, obsessive thinking, right? So every single time you start perfecting, you can zoom out by reviewing your GPS. What is the goal you're moving towards? What was the plan again? Okay, let's continue. So that's on the surface, and you're already doing it by doing step 1. But only if it were that easy. Only if we could just keep zooming out, right? You and I know that it isn't that easy. And that's where step 2 comes in. And let me again preface this by saying most of you aren't going to do this. And that's okay. And we'll get into that in a second. But I understand, because it is very uncomfortable. But it is the only way, and I can tell you this through experience, it is the only way in which you fight this shadow at the root, allowing you to actually change the situation and become someone new, become a superior version of yourself. If you are really serious about seeing your potential and your financial potential, I genuinely started making money with my online coaching business incomparably to the situation before, when I embraced this second step and just made it a part of myself. The second step is to start collecting failures at high velocity. Let me explain. You have essentially 2 decisions. Either you go into the chaos and fear, or it comes to you. And the difference is that when you go into it, you realize that it was never real, right? Just as when you finally publish that YouTube video, you actually realize the fear wasn't real. There is no fear of rejection. It's just before you do it, right? But so if you don't, and this chaos and fear comes for you, then it controls you. So you have 2 decisions, right? It's like the water buffaloes, that when they see a storm, they actually walk into it, because they have learned that if they walk into it, they're actually in the storm for just a brief moment. You have to go into the chaos, into the fear. That is the reality of our psychology. You must get excited about your failures, or you will be controlled by that fear for the rest of your life. And the system I use for this is 4F. Fail fast, fail forward. Call those leads and start accumulating those no's. Approach that girl on the street. Post that first video. just for yourself, just purely for the idea to fail. If you just fail fast and fail forward, rather than living in the illusion that you can prevent failure for the rest of your life, then everything will change, and I promise you that. And most of you are hearing this and it reminds you of something you've heard before about failure, and maybe it's become this cliche, but if you are not getting uncomfortable, then nothing is changing. If you aren't changing, then you will do what you have done before and you will get what you've gotten before. So that is controlled chaos. Step 1, set your GPS, goal, plan, and system. And whenever you get this urge to walk the line into this shadow realm of controlling and perfectionism, zoom out. Zoom back out to your GPS. As if you're driving your car and you're looking at the GPS. Zoom out, create this helicopter view, and it will fight this whole mechanism of going down in the submarine and creating this narrow sense of the world, making you quite stupid in what you do. And then second, fail fast, fail forward in anything you do. It doesn't matter. This applies to everything. Give yourself the advantage and do yourself the favor of showing yourself that fear isn't real. Fail fast, fail forward, sharpen your blade through failure and get one step closer to the life that you want to live 10 times faster. I cannot restate enough how much time this cost me. This will bring you a sense of freedom in everything you do, and it will show you a new level of performance. And with that, I'd like to leave you with a quote from this book that will help you a lot with these kinds of issues. We're talking about, it's called U Squared by Price Pritchett. And the quote goes, "Everything you want is already here. You just need to get out of the way." So through this channel, in very different ways, I'm trying to build a movement of men impacting the world and earning their financial freedom through digital leverage. And if you want to join us, then subscribing is of course free, or you can check out the training program and network where we're doing this together. And here's a video I made about convincing your mind to achieve practically anything. You can check it out here. And with that, I will see you in the next one. Take care of yourself, man.